It's funny that about a week ago, I was surfing through eBay and I bookmarked an item, started watching an item. It was a bucket list item for the studio. Um, I really wanted Christopher Reeve's autograph. And, for a long time, it was just out of my price range. Christopher Reeve died when I was in graduate school. And I'll never forget waking up that morning and turning on my computer and checking the news, and Christopher Reeve was dead. And it was shocking because even though this awful thing had happened to him, he had been alive for the better part of a decade at that point, and you just thought, well, he's going to be okay. He's got the best of care. He's immortal. He's Superman. And then he's not there anymore. And even though I didn't know him personally and all that kind of stuff, it was just a real sucker punch. I think the only other time I felt that sad in my life was at my grandfather's funeral. And that was just a year or two ago. But my recollections of Superman, the films, I saw them on the ABC Saturday Night Movie. I saw the extended versions of Superman 1 and 2 as a child. And that was my introduction to Superman. I did not see Superman 1 and 2 in the theater. I saw 3 and 4 in the theater, and I saw Supergirl in the theater, but I did not see 1 and 2. One of the scenes that haunted me was when Zod's big guy Non throws the siren light all the way across the canyon or the field or whatever and kills that boy trying to get away on a horse. And then in college, I finally got around to watching the films again. I didn't really watch them all that much. You got to remember, those films were so iconic that once you saw them, you didn't forget them. I mean, they were there to stay, and you remembered the music. Oh, the music, and you could hum that theme in your head at will. And I did with my Superpowers figures, which I always thought were Christopher Reeve in his Clark Kent and Superman versions. That's the way I imagined them. But, you finally see the films again. I got them on Laserdisc. This is my Superman the Movie Laserdisc from when I was in high school. And I've also got the Superman 2 Laserdisc, and it was the first time to really revisit these movies. And I saw them again, and those scenes weren't in there, and it was very jarring. But what came back immediately was the score, the mood, Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder's chemistry. And that was my Superman. Like, that was Superman. And always will be. I know people say, well, this is my James Bond, and this is my Batman. And there's some validity to that. Christopher Reeve and those Superman movies, though, especially the first one, and to a lesser degree the second one, they had a powerful impact on how we perceive the character across multiple generations. I recently saw Justice League, and there was no heart in that movie. It was very paint by numbers. It looked like it was all done on a green screen. It felt, frankly, cheap, and it was obvious that the people making that movie still aren't plugged into what a superhero is and what that mood needs to be. So when I was in college, we found out that the print for Superman was deteriorating, and Warner Brothers wasn't doing anything about it. So I set up a table downstairs in the lobby of my dorm, and I put a TV on there with a VCR, and I had dubs of my laser discs on VHS tape, and I started just playing the first two Superman movies. and trying to collect signatures to get the movie restored. And I got a bunch of signatures from film professors and everybody else, and I mailed it, back when we had this thing called paper and mail. I mailed it to Warner Brothers, and everybody around the country and in most of the Western world was trying to get this done on the internet back then. Because the films were so well crafted that even though I hadn't seen them since I was a kid, they really didn't diminish. They're not perfect movies by any stretch of the imagination. Even part one isn't a perfect movie. But it's such a powerful statement on the purity of a superhero, rescuing people, making the world a better place. And we're sadly lacking that at this point. They tried to pay some lip service to it in Justice League, but it really just came off as, oh yeah, that stuff we forgot in the last 5 movies. Let's Band-Aid that in a little bit on this one with Superman. So all that to say is that Superman has been coming in and out of my life a lot. And he was also my favorite superhero as a child. He was the first character that I ever did a Halloween costume for, and he was the comic book I collected the most voraciously. I had an unbroken 30-year run of every Superman title for quite a long time before I got rid of them, for space, really, and to help out with the studio. And now Margot Kidder's gone. So Clark and Lois and Clark, the two of the most iconic Lois and Clarks, not counting George Reeves and Noel Neill, who are, they're sort of the grandfather and grandmother of the ultimate, Lois and Clark dynamic in live action. No disrespect to Kirk Allen. It's crazy because we lost Carrie Fisher similarly to bipolar disorder and health issues that arose from that condition coupled with drug use. And Margot Kidder was the same way in the sense that we've lost her at a relatively young age for the 21st century. She was part of that same filmmaking period when everybody was filming these breakthrough blockbuster sci-fi movies in England. She was one of those brunettes of the age. We had Carrie Fisher, we had Karen Allen, we had Margot Kidder, we had Adrian from Rocky, we had, for better or worse, we had Shelley Duvall. I mean, they were all part of that same era. And some of them got away unscathed, like, Karen Allen and Adrian. But some of them didn't. I'm still on pins and needles about Shelley Duvall. Not that she was as important to our childhoods as Margot Kidder and Carrie Fisher were. I met Margot Kidder very briefly at my very first Dragon Con. I met her at Dragon Con 2004. And she was signing autographs at a table. And it's funny, I met Margot Kidder the same year that Christopher Reeve died, it's weird. I met her at the convention, and I was a poor grad student, so I couldn't afford her autograph. Not that she was charging an outrageous amount or anything like that, but that's how strapped you are when you're in college. And I just was stunned to be, within 10 feet of her. And then I was at the Marriott, and I was headed down the escalator, and Margot Kidder happened to be heading up the escalator right next to me. It was kind of a, one of these deals. And I thought, well, she's not at her booth, and we're passing each other, so it's not like I'm about to bother her or impede her in any way. And so I said to her as we passed, I said, "I love your work, Miss Kidder." And in that quirky kind of way, that quirky way that she and Carrie Fisher both kind of had with their demeanor and the way they carried themselves, she kind of threw her hand up like this as a cavalier wave, and she said, "Thank you," and she kept going. I'm not going to say or even imply that was some kind of deep connection in any way, but it is nice to know that I was able to tell her how much her work had meant to me, if even so briefly. And now she's gone too, and it's sudden. And I'm not going to say that Lois Lane occupies the same space as Princess Leia. I'm not going to be so pretentious as to say that. But Margot Kidder, for all of her quirks that some people don't like about her Lois, for all the, imperfections in, I guess, that portrayal at that time period in our culture, I think she did a fantastic job in the role, and she is the other actor in the ultimate superhero moment in any superhero movie ever. If there was ever a scene in any movie that perfectly captured what a comic book superhero is all about, it's the helicopter rescue of at the Daily Planet. And you can say that the special effects back then look primitive now. You can say that the process screens look, obvious now, even though back then it was state of the art. The one thing that I challenge you on is Margot Kidder's performance as she's falling out of that helicopter as it crashes on the side of the Daily Planet. I challenge you to poke any holes in the authenticity of that. Her performance alone carried the absolute peril to the audience and sold the idea that this was really happening and things were really bad and there was no way out of this. And then Superman shows up.
Hey, Jim! Whoa! Excuse me.
For the first time on Earth. And her reaction to Christopher Reeve, him selling it completely straight and her selling it like a person would if somebody just swooped out of the sky, flying under their own power, and caught you as you knew you were going to certain death.
What the hell is that? Easy, miss. I've got you.
You've got me! Who's got you?
It was perfect. It was absolutely perfect. And that's one of those big Academy Award missteps, Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder should have both won Oscars for that one scene alone. But of course, back then and even now, the Academy Awards doesn't really play nice with that kind of thing. So I bought this autograph set of Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder, and it's going to be shipped, I hope, soon to the studio. And it was funny because I started watching the item on eBay when Margot Kidder was alive, which, like I said, was a week ago. And then today, when I found out that, she had died, I'd already made the purchase. And so I was like, oh, well, I guess they were both dead when I got their autographs. But they are both, because, and the reason I bring Christopher Reeve into this discussion is because Christopher Reeve died, over 14 years ago now, and we weren't around then, so I feel like the recollection needs to be together because they were a matched set in that movie, and Christopher Reeve deserves his place in this as well. They're both together now again, and I know they were just actors. I know that they were just in a few movies together, but by their own admission, They were lifelong friends, and you can see it on the DVD interviews. You can hear it in Richard Donner's voice. So that kind of camaraderie that comes with being in a long-running film series together, whether it's Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher or Margot Kidder and Christopher Reeve, I think it's very real. And it's stunning that they're both gone. But the comfort that I would bring is that, when I was driving home today and I was thinking about it, I was just like, if you're quiet, and you're thinking about this film, you can always hear the music. So if you stop and think about Margot Kidder, or you stop and think about Christopher Reeve long enough, I bet you right now, if you've seen the movie before, even if you haven't seen it in 20, 25, 30 years, I bet you if you stop and just have a moment of quiet and think about Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder as Superman and Lois Lane, I bet you can hear the music right now.